Our subject is a little bit tricky. It's a little delicate, so uh, we'll try to tackle it with some nuance. There is a famous story. Everybody knows the story that Rabbi Akiva was with his friends and they were grieving when they saw a fox coming out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and Rabbi Akiva was laughing. And they asked him why he's laughing, and he challenged them and said, "Why are you crying?" And they said, "We're crying because here, the holiest place where the holiest person couldn't even uh, go other than one time a year, here there's foxes running out of it." So Rabbi Akiva said, "That's exactly why I'm laughing, because the pasuk connects the nevuah of Uriah with the nevuah of Zechariah, and one is in Bais Rishon, one's Bais Sheni. It doesn't seem as though there should be a connection, and he said that the connection is that when the nevuah of the destruction is complete, then we have to look at the nevuah of the restoration of the glory of Klal Yisrael, of Od Yeshu Zakenim Uzakenos, that the elderly will be able to sit leisurely in Yerushalayim and watch their grandchildren and great grandchildren as they thrive. So Rabbi Akiva said to them, if I understand this message, it is that you are attaching yourselves to that which you see. And I am attaching myself to that which has been prophesied, to the nevuah. Let's get that clear, that distinction. If you are stuck with what you see, then you will fail to know the reality, because the reality is what we are told is the reality. It's not the reality that a person sees with his fleshic eyes. They saw this reality, but he understood that that was not the reality. The reality was the nevuah of the restoration of Klal Yisrael. That doesn't mean that everything is going to be rosy. Certainly, Rabbi Akiva knew, and he had been told, that his end was going to be very bitter. But he's always asking the question, what reality am I meant to look at? What reality am I meant to see? And that is always going to be different than the reality that we see. There are many such illustrations. A person, the Mishnah says that one moment of tshuva, masim tovim, of Torah in this world is greater. It provides more pleasure in the world to come than all of the pleasure of this world. That means if you aggregate all the pleasure that has ever been experienced in this world, it would not equal the pleasure that a person enjoys eternally for one moment, for shah achas, for one moment of Torah, tshuva, of masim tovim. That is a reality that a person does not see. It's a reality that he only knows because Chazal revealed that reality. And a person has to always be walking around with some reality that he knows that contradicts that which he sees. If he's limited to what he sees, he will always be getting it wrong. There's an amazing story that Rabbi Yochanan was giving a drasha. He was giving a shir based on a tradition that he had received of how to understand a pasuk. And the tradition was that Hashem will prepare huge diamond doors for the future Beis Hamikdash. And the student said, Rebbe, you can't even find a diamond as big as an egg. How are you going to find one that's 30 amos by 30 amos? Apparently, this student was no slouch, because when he was on the high seas on a journey, he saw heavenly angels, Malachei Hashares. That's not something that everybody gets to see. And he sees them working with this massive diamond, 30 amos by 30 amos. And he asks them, what are you doing and what is its purpose? And they reported that they're part of the detail that works on these massive stones, 30 amos by 30 amos diamonds, that will in the future be the doors and affixed unto the doors of the Beis Hamikdash. When he came back, he praised Rabbi Yochanan. And he said, you are the right one to be giving the shir. You should be telling the drushos. Because just the way you said it is the way I saw it. And Rabbi Yochanan finished him off. He said, and when I told you that was not enough, you didn't see those diamond doors when I told you that that was what the pasuk is referring to? What did this student miss? The student missed that we're supposed to always be walking around with a reality that is increasingly clear to us because Chazal revealed it to us. And therefore we don't get distracted by our physical eyes. So when there was a man who threw out a fresh widow and orphans from their home, while the charity collectors of the city pleaded with him to give them a little more time to get the money together to pay her rent, they assured him that he would not lose out. They just needed a little more time to collect the money to pay for her rent. And he insisted. He, in fact, took the roof off of the dwelling that they were in, and the rain forced them out into the street. The Chafetz Chaim already saw him dead and abandoned. But he was sitting on top of the world. It's a wealthy man. He was sitting on top of the world. But the Chafetz Chaim said he already saw it. So that it wasn't a surprise in any way that when a plague broke out in the city, and this man died in the middle of the street, and nobody would come near him to bury him because they were afraid of the contagion, and that his elderly father had to dig a shallow grave and schlep his remains to a shallow grave. People thought, oh, look at that. He got his compensation for what he had done to that widow and those orphans. But that's not what happened. The Chafetz Chaim already saw it, because the pasuk says that there is very dire consequence to oppressing a widow and an orphan. He didn't need to wait to see it happen. In fact, the ones who needed to wait to see it happen are like the one who needed to see the angels with those huge stones. That's not the way a Jew lives. A Jew lives according to the prophecies that are given in the Torah. And it's those prophecies that almost invariably contradict that which the person sees with his physical eyes. And being able to make that transition is the key to living a Torah life. And if you'll allow me to take this even a step deeper, the Gemara says that there's great comfort that comes from seeing evildoers be successful in this world. If you see an evildoer who is being very successful, you make the simple calculation. Wow, if an evildoer gets such good, then imagine the good that will be coming to those who are serving Hashem, who do good. That kal v'chomer. And if you see suffering happening to those who serve Hashem, says the Gemara, that should be greatly comforting. Wow. If even those who serve Hashem are called to task for the slightest variance from their required duties, then boy, those who do not serve Hashem should really watch out. See, but it's entirely contradicted by what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing, both sides of this kal v'chomer, is not what we're seeing. It's what we know. And it's we're be able, through our belief, to see something different than what we previously saw. Our belief allows us to see the glory that is going to come to those who serve Hashem, because we see an evildoer having a good life. And we're able to see the evil that will befall those who are neglecting their duties to Hashem and to their fellow, because we see that righteous people suffer. That even the slightest variance invokes a certain suffering, maybe even great suffering. So they learn from that, and they're able to see that in the reality. This idea that a Jew is always meant to be walking with an alternate reality that he got from his tradition, from that which was passed on reliably. If it wasn't passed on reliably, it's not useful. That is where we get into superstition. That's where we get, excuse me, into all sorts of trouble. Because it's once you have people who are seeing reality through a different lens, then you also have danger, because somebody else can pump them with something else. If you just daven in this place, you'll be redeemed. If you just say these words, if you just do this, you'll be redeemed. So that's very dangerous, because you're speaking to an audience that has a sensitivity to that which they can't see. And if you take advantage of it, it's very easy to lapse into superstition, possibly even worse. So we have a little bit of a double-edged sword, and that is that a person has to believe in that which is absolutely reliable. So Rabbi Akiva says, we're living with the belief, and we can see the elderly grandparents and great-grandparents watching their great-grandchildren in the streets of Yerushalayim. He saw it already because that was the nevuah. Everybody who tells the story about the Panovich Rav, Bnei Brak at that time was nothing but just a little barren hill. And the Panovich Rav, at a time when nobody was thinking about building Torah, the war was looming, and it looked as though Yimach Shemo was going to be encroaching on Eretz Yisrael. And he's showing people this hill. And he said, you see the base medrash? You see? My sister did that with Meitar. She pointed out where things are going to be. Because if a person has a vision, and the vision may contradict what they see, but if they have a vision, then that vision overtakes and overrides the current reality because of the vision. So we have vision that is granted to us by prophets. And for some reason, the secular world has sent a very unambiguous message. You must never be moved by that which you cannot see. It's only what you see is what you get. And that's it. If what you see is what you get, if you live your life that way, you will never live the life of a Jew. The life of a Jew is when he's about to do an Aveira, he sees the horrific consequences that will come from that Aveira. When he's about to do a mitzvah, he gets excited because he sees and he knows about the tremendous glory that comes to those who perform his will. So there is a danger, but it's a danger because of who we are. We brought the world a message that it's not what you see, that seeing is not believing. And much of the world took it, and they went to idolatry, and they went to superstition, and they made alternate religions. Nobody told anyone that they could rely on an afterlife that was just because they were forgiven. That's not a reliable chazal. And the 70 virgins is not a reliable chazal. But we brought the world the idea that you can live with a reality that you can't see. And one of the consequences of that is that there are many people, some within the fold and many outside of the fold, who will take that to excesses and will take that to places that aren't true, that aren't reliable. So with the gift of being able to see beyond what our physical eyes see comes the responsibility of being very meticulous to make sure that we study the prophecies, that we study them carefully, that we study that which Chazal teach us with responsibility so that we know what we're relying on and that it doesn't simply align with our fantasies. It aligns with Hashem's will because he's the one who expressed those prophecies. So on the one hand, if we only have a world where what you see is what you get, then there is no spiritual life at all. On the other hand, if believing can tell you to see something that you don't see with your physical eyes, then there's the risk of taking that to extremes. So that's why I introduced this by saying this is a delicate subject, but it's a subject that's absolutely critical. At all times, a Jew must have in mind that what he sees is other because of what he believes, because he knows, and therefore he's able to see through the reality that presents itself with his physical eyes.